Good morning. So I was just thinking about a concept. It's been on my mind for a few days, but it's the saying that goes that people can only meet you as far as they've met themselves. And sometimes we're like, well, what does that really even mean? From my perspective, what it means is that people come to the table with their own lived experiences, but if they have not done the work of being self aware, reflecting on their actions, thinking about how what they did in a situation could have been different or how their actions affect others because they can't see outside of what is immediately happening in front of them. They don't, just may not have the capacity to see anything except what exactly they're going through in that moment. And so that comes with also a level of personal responsibility to your own healing. And meaning that you can come to a person and say, hey, I actually am bothered by X, Y, and Z, or you give them a boundary. You can be as gentle and as kind as you want to be. But even if in that moment you are frustrated and so you don't exactly say something with a neutral tone, it's automatically received as a personal attack. They're feeling like you're attacking them. Your boundaries feel personal to them. It feels like a war zone is happening because you unknowingly are triggering an issue within them that they have not faced yet, something that they have not healed within themselves. So that becomes a harder place to navigate a relationship from because you're constantly swallowing your own hurt to try, and it goes beyond trying to just keep the peace. I think, like in my personal situation, somebody made the comment to me when I was talking about it to them that am I accepting of the love that I think that I deserve? And for me, it's not about accepting less than what I know that I deserve. It's more about wanting to love people unconditionally, exactly the way that they are. But in that unconditional love does not mean unconditional tolerance. There are still boundaries that have to be maintained within myself so that way I'm not constantly just giving and feeling drained and then getting nothing in return because that person does not have the capacity to meet me in my struggle because everything in their life is so big, so heavy that they cannot hold space for somebody that, I don't know how to say this without coming off as like, damn, she's really into herself or really full of herself, but there's levels to this shit, right? If you have done the work of healing XYZ and the person that you know, not exactly the same situation, but has had similar experiences, but has not done any of the work to heal X, Y, and Z, when you experience that after healing, when you experience something, it's just about maybe that one situation, that one something. Sure, there can still be some triggers that came from your past and previous things, your history, but that does not mean that that history is weighing really, really heavily on whatever's happening now. But with the person that you are looking to get support from because they've been in your life and they're supposed to be part of your support team, if they have not done that underlying work, when they experience something, it's all of those things inside of one because they haven't built up resilience. So it feels bigger, darker, and heavier for them. And when they come, you look to them for a support team, they're not necessarily going to be able to meet you in that place of support because whatever you're going through is probably triggering something that happened to them before. And so it makes it harder for them to show up for that. And then also because you have done XYZ healing, they just look at you like, oh, well, you're the strong one. You're going to figure it out. You probably have people in your life that are better equipped to support this situation. And while to an extent that may be true, that maybe there is somebody that is more equipped to handle giving you support for that specific thing. I know I'm being vague here because I'm not trying to air out a bunch of dirty laundry. That's not really the point of this. It's more so finding a way to accept that certain people are not going to be able to show up for you the way that you need support. And it's up to you to recognize that. And it's not holding anything against a person, but it is honoring yourself in a way to where you're getting what you need, because you can't just constantly give and be there and do this for somebody else without also being able to rely on somebody in your own life. That is so lonely. And the more, some people are in a situation where if you pull away from them because you feel like you're not getting what you deserve from that relationship, and then you end up isolated, that is some of the loneliest shit that you can ever go through in your life. But in that, it's also up to us to know that one single person is not meant to be everything for you. That's the beauty of having different relationships with people, because each one of them can do something, some way that supports you without having to take on the pressure of doing it all for you or being your only source of support, because that is extremely hard to continuously carry one person throughout their entire journey, throughout all of their crappy friendships that they experience, through their issues with their parents, etc. Like, it's a lot for one person. And I can recognize that people who are going through their healing journey, actively involved in healing themselves, know that they cannot put everything onto one person. And being a part of your own healing journey, you also recognize that sometimes people just don't have the capacity. And especially in this day and age, we're all struggling. We all are. We're all feeling the effects of rising prices, just trying to survive and live, going through issues with work, being scared, watching so many people be hurt and ripped away from their families. Like, that is so heavy to carry day in and day out. And not everybody's going to be able to relate to how much of that you have empathy and compassion for. But regardless, if you continue to find yourself making excuses for people and constantly accepting less than you deserve, it puts you in a position to where you start to feel maybe a little bit inadequate. You maybe start to feel a little bit of resentment towards people. And that's why it's so important to maintain your own personal boundaries, because then you're not draining so much of your energy and then not being able to get anything in return. You have to find people that are also going to be able to fill your cup. It's not just about filling somebody else's cup. And you can want to love people exactly where they are, which is something that I've worked hard on over my adulthood, because my thing was me being unhealed and having to do so much of my journey on my own, because I had to do a lot of work of breaking cycles. I didn't come from a healthy family. I didn't come from a loving, peaceful household. I had to create that, and I had to create it based off of no blueprint. I didn't have anybody to really look up to. I had very few people throughout my life that were peppered in, that were healthy for me, that helped me to see a different way. But I also didn't grow up in that environment, so that's not something that just came naturally to me. And so I had to learn to accept that just because I am doing XYZ doesn't mean that I can place those expectations on somebody else for their lives. And that was something that was difficult for me, because I just couldn't wrap my head around how you could want to stay stuck. That was my thought process before. You want to stay stuck in this. And maybe some people, it's hard, especially when you're trying to heal your nervous system. People who are brought up in a lot of chaos tend to gravitate towards that chaos, because that's what their nervous system is used to. It doesn't mean that it was safe for them. It doesn't mean that you're thriving in chaos. You're not. You're surviving it. And that is very clear when you're constantly dealing with something super big and super heavy and constantly triggered into past situations of the trauma that you grew up with. That's a clear sign. If you're constantly reliving that old trauma because of the chaos that probably is not the same. It's probably way different, the chaos that you're in now. But then you keep telling yourself, oh, I just thrive in chaos. I'm good in chaos. But then you find it hard to function in your day-to-day life. That probably means that you're not thriving in chaos. You're figuring out a way to continuously survive it, because you still have not built the tools to regulate, build resilience, heal from those other things. And then when you are in a relationship, it doesn't have to be, relationships exist on all levels, right? We're not just talking about boyfriend and girlfriend, husband and wife. We can talk about friends, we can talk about sisters, brothers, cousins, like all of these relationships is what I'm talking about. So then when you are dealing with somebody that you're in relationship with, that you're looking to get support from, but they are not in the same place with you as, you know, the healing journey, they still have all of these layers to uncover, whereas those layers aren't, not that they're not present because they don't just go away, but they're not the same layers that you have to deal with. Like the presenting problem is actually the problem that you need support with, but the presenting problem is triggering past hurt that has nothing to do with you in this other person. And in being a person who has actively worked to just accept and love people where they are, not placing your own expectations on where you think they should be, and all of the tools that you have that you've maybe tried to share with them, it doesn't mean that they know how to place it, how to use it, because, well, personally, I'm not a counselor. So I may have taken some courses in college, but I didn't finish. I didn't graduate being a licensed human services worker, because at the time of taking those courses, I was being triggered a lot by what was happening when I was 19, 20 years old, trying to go through these things. And I'm being triggered by a lot of unhealed things so I had to go back. I stopped going to college, quit college, and had to do a lot of work in my own healing journey. And this is part of it. Now, like I said, unconditional love does not mean unconditional acceptance. And so having to learn and maintain boundaries, and understanding that boundaries they're not walls, they're not meant to be walls. When I first started this, I did have walls, and I had to tear those all down and figure out, okay, what actually makes sense? What is actually a boundary? What is actually protecting me and my heart, while also being able to give support, offer love, without placing my own expectations, thoughts, worries, concerns, etc. onto another person, and accepting them for who they are. Now, sometimes when you accept a person for who they are, you have to separate from them. And that was a lot of what I went through when I was going through my journey, is that I did come to a place where I had to cut people off. Now, I don't think that the whole cutoff culture is necessarily the right thing to do. If somebody's just challenging the way that you think, or challenging, I say that with quotes because sometimes when people say, oh, you're challenging me, like, just for an example, somebody said this to my husband, one of his parents, oh, you just always challenge me. She was saying it in a negative term because she doesn't like that he speaks his mind and tells her his feelings. I digress. Challenging in this sense, it's not a negative thing to me. It's just about maybe seeing differently. You're seeing differently, so it challenges what your views are. So sometimes when you're challenged, or when somebody thinks differently than you, some people will get to the point where, like, well, this is unhealthy for me, so I'm just going to cut them off. But that's not what I'm saying. Like, what I went through was a really abusive situation. And sometimes you have to recognize that those people, because of their own trauma, do not have the capacity to change. Some I don't, and I hate saying that, because at the same time, I do believe that people have the ability to change. But I guess it also comes down to what they are willing to do. And some people are just not willing to try anything else. They have gotten too comfortable and too familiar with what they are inside of at this moment. And so that brings me to back all the way around to the beginning. After this whole roundabout story, people can only meet you as far as they've met themselves. When, say, like, you are dealing with a thing and you're looking for support from somebody, and their first thing that they say is, well, I just have a lot going on. I also have a lot going on. I also have things, and I'm just looking for a little bit of, I don't know, validation. I'm just trying to talk things out loud, say things out loud. I didn't come to you to ask you to fix my problems. Maybe the support that I need is just talking out loud and getting my thoughts out, or, you know, whatever. But in my personal experience, sometimes those people who, again, can only meet you as far as they've met themselves, maybe don't have capacity to be there for your support. And it's a difficult pill to swallow when you need it, but then you have nowhere else to go because you've poured so much into being there for this person who, I don't want to say needy because that's not, their needy has a negative connotation to it usually, and that's not the point. It's just that they have had a lot of struggles and are maybe actively living in a little bit of chaos, and you want to be there for that person. You want to hold their hand and bring them along in your journey and tell them all the things that you did, show them all the tools that you have available. But if they aren't in a place to see that and accept it from you, they're just going to continue to go through what they have to go through until they figure it out for themselves. You can want to be there for somebody so bad, but unless that person is in a place to, again, accept it and work on it on their own, they're going to continue to wade through their journey in their own time. And it can be hurtful when you are actively asking, hey, I could really use this. And then they come back to you with, well, I can't because I have XYZ. And so being an empathetic and compassionate person, you say to yourself, yeah, you're right. It was maybe not directly to them. Maybe you think to yourself, yeah, it was not okay or wrong of me or not fair of me to ask them to be there for me because they have so much going on. It might not be fair to them, but it's also not fair to yourself. And that's the part that I struggle with lately, because in being an empathetic and compassionate person, I often make excuses for people because of where they are at within their own capacity. And in that understanding, you just say, well, it's not fair of me to put anything else on them because they have so much that they're going through. But it's also not fair to you to not have a source of support outside of your own home. Everybody needs friendships. Everybody needs, friendships, yes. I will not, it's so hard. I wanted to say sibling support, but not all of us have that available either. Some of us are only children. Some of us have siblings who are still actively living in cycles of dysfunction that you do not. And so that piece is hard, but everybody needs relationships outside of the home that they're in with the people that they live with. And so when you spend so much time giving a person love, showing them unconditional love, accepting them for exactly where they are, offering them a lot of grace because they aren't able to show up for you in the way that you need. But if you're constantly swallowing your own hurt let me see how I want to say this. If you're constantly swallowing your own hurt, it's not about keeping the peace. It's because you have so much understanding, right? You can see the big picture. And so you extend such a mass amount of grace and understanding. And then the moment you express the hurt or a grievance or whatever, and you're met with their defense. Why have XYZ? Why have this and this and that? But then they don't ever stop to consider how those actions have affected you and the relationship, and they cannot see outside of themselves in order to support you or even say, hey, yeah, I'm sorry. I know I have all of this stuff and I haven't been able to support you. It would be a completely different feeling that's received by you than to hear, well, I have all of this stuff going on and I just can't. And instead of, hey, yeah, I'm sorry. I know I haven't really been able to support you. I've got XYZ happening and I don't know what the solution is to that problem, but I do know it feels a lot different when somebody is able to recognize, hey, yeah, I haven't really been there in the way that you deserve, instead of taking it as a personal attack when you're saying, this really hurts me. It's just so different. But again, this whole long rant that I'm going on comes back to people can only meet you as far as they've met themselves. And some people again, do not have the capacity to reflect on their actions and see how those actions affect other people, because they're viewing their actions through the lens of their own trauma. Their own trauma is telling them, when you are expressing your hurt, oh, I'm not good enough. It's making them feel small, even though you didn't approach the situation that way. You didn't go off on them. You didn't spiral. You didn't call them names. You didn't call them out their character. You didn't say, you always do this to me. You just express frustrations. And they're immediately, well, this, that, and the other. And if you can't see that, then you're the problem. But it's never about, well, I also have this, that, and the other going on, and I got dumped on with all of this other stuff as well. All I'm saying is, this being dumped on me by you is not really fair, but you can't see that dump onto that next person, how it affects them, because you can't see outside of the problems that you have that are right in front of you. Maybe there's, let's call them little tiny fires all over the place that you have to focus on putting out constantly. And so when somebody else says, hey, actually, like, I'm not going to accept that. Like, this is not okay for you to put on me. That feels like another fire that's going on in front of them. They feel like you've added onto their fire instead of seeing that they have fire. I don't know. I know I'm going on with this metaphor, and I'm like trying to connect the dots back into each other. But what they don't see is that they placed a bunch of fire in front of you, and you're like, no, well, actually, I'm not going to take this fire. That fire belongs to you. And so they can't see that actually it was me that put a lot on you and created a fire in front of your, a place where there was no fires, or at least not a fire like that. They're pushing off their fire onto whatever fire you have, because your fire looks like an ember in comparison to a bonfire. Maybe yours is a lighter and theirs is a bonfire. And so they don't see that they just added on to your stuff because, well, you only had a little lighter's worth of fire, but I've got this whole bonfire, this huge bonfire in front of me, and you just added back into my bonfire that I'm trying to get rid of. But when somebody doesn't have the capacity to have honest conversations with themselves about where they are in their lives, and you have to start operating based off of the history and the patterns that you see if these patterns have existed for a long time, and you keep operating on the hopes that something's going to change. If I keep operating on the hopes that something's going to change instead of recognizing the patterns that were right in front of me, at that point, it's my fault. Because why am I continuing to put something on somebody that has repeatedly showed me they don't have the capacity to do it? That's not on them at that point. It's on me. Don't put your hope and faith into something being drastically different when it's always been the same. And that is not to say that you can't accept when people change. It's just that, let me think about this for a second. It's not that you're saying that person cannot change. It's that you maybe should wait until they show you that change has actually been made before you start trusting something else, because it's going to save you and yourself a lot. We can want and hope and love somebody so much, but that doesn't mean that they are going to be able to do anything different. Maybe at this point. It doesn't mean that they never will have the capacity to do anything different, not that they don't have the capacity to change in some way, shape, or form, but you can't live in a relationship on somebody's potential. I know this is not the first time that you've heard that, and if you've watched the video all the way to this point, you're like, well, duh. You can't love somebody into their potential. And also, why are we placing expectations on people like that? Why are we thinking that they need to be anything except who they are? That comes with the loving people for exactly where they are. But again, unconditional love doesn't mean unconditional tolerance. You decide what you are willing to accept. You decide that. And so does that come with, okay, maybe when I'm dealing with XYZ, I'm not telling this person. And it is also very heavy to hold. Like, you also have to allow yourself to grieve the situation, because that person is never going to, might not ever be who you need or who you expected them to be. It's really hard, and you shouldn't only be friends with people who can't show up for also the hard things. When they say, I can't, believe them, but also they don't have to be involved in the joy necessarily either. If they can't show up for the things and the places in which you're struggling because everything for them feels too dark and heavy, their fires are too big, but then they have no problem showing up for parties, etc., whatever, or lacking communication skills, that is one of the biggest things. But then you have to also recognize that they haven't gotten to that place of the learning. So that right there, it's such a struggle because you want to meet them exactly where they are, and based off of where you've been in your journey, you can do that. But then it's not being able to be reciprocated because they haven't met themselves at that point yet. And like, people who lack in communication skills or lack in boundaries, even within themselves and what they allow, they're often going to overpromise. And while you want to believe that they will show up and they will do the things that they say that they're going to do, they haven't met themselves at the point where they can be honest about their own capacity, because they actively do want to do these things. I'm not saying that they don't. It's not malicious, right? It's just that they don't have the capacity to hold it there. And so they can make all these promises, they can say all of these things, but when they actively show you over and over again that when it comes to actually showing up, being present for those things that they say that they're going to do, and then they don't, there's a lot of hurt there, right? There's a lot of hurt from the person that was on the receiving end of that. But because that person, opposite party, hasn't met themselves there yet, all they can see is, well, I'm going through this thing that's really heavy, and so I can't be there for that person. And even though I'm expressing I can't be there for that person, they're not recognizing the actions that led to this point. And so when you express, hey, that really hurt, they can't see that, how it did, because they can't see outside of their fire line. There's too much there that's blocking them. All they can see is right there in front of them. They can't see that or accept that when they say that they're going to do something and they don't do it, they don't see how much that affects the opposite party, because they haven't gotten to that place to be able to see outside of their fire line. All in all, to say is two things can be true at once, right? That they don't have the capacity. They can't see outside of what they have going on because it's a lot. But you also have a right to be upset about it. You also have a right to feel a certain type of way about it. Now, reactions do matter, of course. I'm not saying to go to that person and just go off on them, because that's not helpful. That is adding to their fire. I'm not saying to do that. But if you express hurt and you see then how your hurt is received by them, it could be a couple of different ways. It could be they take accountability and say, you're right, I really haven't been there, and I'm sorry about that. Or, I can't believe you're putting anything else on me, because you see everything that I'm going through. I have all of this stuff happening to me. That's a big tell on where they are. And so you have to learn how to accept it. Like I said, I'm not saying to go off on this person. It doesn't have to be some big knockout, drag out thing. It could just be something that you hold. It could be a letter that you write that you never send. But all in all, you do have to allow yourself to actually feel that hurt and not swallow it, not explain it away. Just feel it. But in being in a position where you are able to hold compassion and understanding and see things from somebody else's point of view, you accept them for where they are, but you don't continue to accept those behaviors into your life. And again, I'm not saying cut them off. I'm just saying maintain boundaries. I'm saying maybe you start to build a support system outside of them and start to nurture those people more that can show up for you, that can be there for you, can do certain things for you. And so, yeah, if you stayed to the end, thank you. These things have just been on my mind over the past couple of weeks. And so I don't know what the point of me posting this is going to be. It's a really long rant, maybe to sit in the trenches along with somebody else, maybe connection. I don't know exactly, but maybe trying to be more vulnerable, maybe talk a little bit more about the things that I'm going through in the moment without giving it all away, because the point of this is not to sit here and trash talk anybody. That's not it. Otherwise, I could have some shit to say. Man, we've gone through a lot of changes in relationships, boundaries, etc. over the past year with family and stuff. And so anyway, my point is never to, I don't want to just punch down at somebody that's already experiencing so much hurt, or already going through so many different things. That's never the point. I never want to add to somebody's thing. And that's why so often I've swallowed my hurt, extended an insane level of grace and compassion and understanding to people, and then end up swallowing my own hurt. And then I have to live with that. I have to sit with it with nowhere for it to go, which also isn't fair to me. I got to take care of me. I got to take care of my number one star player. So like I said, all that to say, come to the conclusion that once you realize what somebody's capacity is, what they are able to show up for, what they are able to add to the relationship. And again, it's so much pressure to hold all of that for one person, or to be one person that holds it all. It is a lot. And so you have to continue to nurture the people that are able to fill up your cup as well. You can't just constantly pour into somebody else's and get nothing in return. It leaves you depleted and empty. And then when you pull away, you're isolated and you have somebody that isn't capable of showing up for you. If somebody is only able to be there for you because you continue to put yourself in their space, that's a lot. So nurture the people that are able to nurture you back. And yes, still continue to nurture that person that needs it. Continue to hold their hand, continue to love them exactly where they are, so long as it's not, nobody is completely balanced in relationships, right? That just, some give a little bit more than some, because some people have more to give. And it's not a negative thing. It's just being able to recognize it, so that way it's not becoming a huge, every time something comes up and now it's a fight or an argument or a deflection or a minimization of your feelings. We don't got to do that. We don't got to deal with that. You can show up in the way that you have capacity for that person without overextending yourself and allowing yourself to nurture other relationships that you have with people who can be there for you for other things. It just is what it is. But again, thank you for being here. I am considering of doing more of these thought dumps, but I don't know. We'll see how it goes. Sometimes it's hard to sit here and just talk to the camera and talk about random things. As you can see or hear throughout this entire video, that I don't just necessarily think in a straight line. My thoughts kind of branch all over the place, but the main point of it all remains. People can only meet you as far as they've met themselves.